Good morning. Welcome to the Dallas Chamber of Community Affairs. Today, our guest is Chris Eyler. He is the Vice President with the Northwest Region for Regional Government Affairs, big long title, with the U.S. Chambers. And so U.S. Chamber of Commerce, our chamber belongs to it as a member so that we can make sure that we're up on all things. Also, so that we have an advocate for our chamber here in the state of Oregon. OSCC is active with Chris in keeping in touch. For the Oregon State Chamber also. I met Chris a long time ago, working with, I don't know if it's when I first got to the Dalles or when I was even in Pendleton. So Chris has been a part of this. He was very active and a lot of our meetings, even with the resiliency team, he was popping on, helping us and giving reports what was going on for the gorge. And so he's been very active in our region and we've really appreciated it. He's come to some of the conferences and let us know what the U.S. Chamber is doing on our behalf for us and being us a voice, especially for our small businesses. So I've asked Chris to come here and give us some updates to this group. This is being recorded, so we will have it out on our YouTube so that we can share it with others. So before we start with him, I'm going to have each one of you go around the room, introduce who you are and the organization that you are with. And maybe just for Chris's sake, because he doesn't connect it with you, what your position is at that organization. And then we will, any events, activities and that, I would love for you just to put in the chat and not use this time for that for today. So I'm going to start with Phil Brady and let you introduce yourself.
Good morning, I'm Phil Brady, Wasco County Commissioner. And the areas that I tend to work on, we don't divide regionally or geographically, but the areas I've been working on are housing, houselessness, and environment, energy production.
Thank you, Phil. Scott?
Good morning, everyone. Scott McKay. I'm a community liaison for Circles of Care, which is a program from Age Plus, and we connect older adults who need some kind of periodic support, like friendly visits, transportation, with volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. David Peters?
Good morning, Chris. Dave Peters. I'm with Columbia Cascade Housing, which is a nonprofit, and Mid-Columbia Housing Authority. We're under the same umbrella, sort of. We have approximately 800 vouchers in the gorge, 2 states, 5 counties. We have about 425 apartments, and I manage the center, which does homeownership support. So we do home buying classes, foreclosure prevention, down payment programs, home repair programs. Thanks.
Thank you. Brian? You're on mute. There you go.
Brian Tuck, retired.
Scott?
I think that was me. I'm Scott Hagee. I'm a Wasco County Commissioner as well. Work on anything the county does, focus on economic development for the most part.
Thank you. Dan Spots?
Thank you, Lisa. Dan Spots, Economic Development Officer for the City of the Dalles. Brief update, we have support now from all 3 of the community partners, city, county, and port regarding Earth 280, request for a 5-year tax abatement. We're proceeding with the details of the agreement on that one. This is a carbon sequestration firm based in the Dalles, mechanical carbon sequestration, mechanical credits. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Corliss Marsh?
Good morning, everyone. Corliss Marsh, Columbia Gorge Habitat for Humanity. Good news, we just got some land in Hood River. That's my update.
Okay, thank you. For those who just hopped on, we're asking for your name and your organization and your position within that organization. And if you have any news, it goes into the chat. Darcy Long.
Good morning. Darcy Long, City Councilor for the Dalles.
Tanya?
Good morning, Tanya Brownlee with Northwest Natural.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And with that, Chris, I am turning it over to you. I will be watching for hands raised, questions in the chat so that you don't have to. And then we will just proceed. I'm sure that knowing you, you probably don't mind if there's questions during your presentation, correct?
No, that is fine. Let me just share my screen.
You bet. Perfect.
Great. Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you all for inviting me to join you today. As Lisa said, my name is Chris Eyler. I am the U.S. Chamber's Vice President for the Northwest Region. And just by way of background, the U.S. Chamber, we are your counterpart at the federal level. We represent the business community as well as all of our 1,500 state and local Chamber of Commerce partners before Congress and the administration. As part of our advocacy efforts, we maintain 7 regional offices around the country. I run the Northwest Region office. I am based just up the road in Seattle. There are actually 2 of us who are in the Northwest Region. The other staffer.
Chris, hang on, you just went mute. Okay, try again, Chris. Unmute now. I'm wondering if you froze instead.
Yeah.
Okay, now, where'd you, I can go ahead and speak.
Can you
I
hear me
can
now?
see you and I can hear you. Do you want to just send me your slideshow and I'll try it on my end so you're not using all that bandwidth?
Sure.
Just send it to my email and I'll pop it on.
Okay, hold on for a second.
Yep, yep.
I apologize. They gave me a new laptop, and I've been having all sorts of issues since I got it. So
We know how that goes.
there you go. It should be in your inbox.
Okay, well, give it a minute. You can keep talking while I wait for this to come into my inbox.
Okay, I'm trying to get the camera to come back on.
Oh,
Here, I'm gonna restart because there's something. My computer's going haywire on me.
go ahead and do that. That'll give us a pause and I should be able to hopefully have your thing in my inbox by then. As we all know, technology is great when it works.
Mhm.
Okay, see your square.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, if you just want to put my slides up, you don't need
Yeah.
to see me, I guess.
Okay, well, hang on a second. I'm trying to get that here.
We've all been there. Don't worry.
Okay, let me put you guys over here. Beginning. That. And let me share my screen. It's been a while. share that one. Okay, are you guys?
Great.
Okay.
Great. Well, again, I apologize for the technical glitches, but anyhow, I was explaining just my role as the Northwest Region Director. Basically, it is to work with Lisa and her counterparts at all of the state and local chambers of commerce in Oregon, as well as in the states of Alaska, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. We do this because we want to make sure that, first of all, that you are looped into and informed of what we're doing on behalf of the business community in DC. But more importantly, we want to make sure that we are getting feedback from you as our members to better inform our advocacy agenda. I also just serve as a general point of contact for Lisa for all things U.S. Chamber of Commerce. While most of my work has to do with our public policy and political priorities, there are a variety of things that the U.S. Chamber does, professional development programs, workforce programs that we work with our state and local chamber partners to get them more involved so that they can be of better service to your members. So today, what I want to do is just give you a pretty broad, high-level overview of how we see things in the national economy, our political, our current political challenges, and then just give you a sense of how we see things shaping up for the November elections. So to start with the economy, so could you advance the slides, Lisa? Last year at this time, we would have been having a much different conversation. Last year, we were a lot more pessimistic about things. We felt that the economy would likely slip into a recession at some point in the third or fourth quarter of 2023. Fortunately, that did not happen. The economy continued to grow through 2023, closing the year out in the fourth quarter with 3.4% growth. And it has continued to grow into 2024, albeit not as robust a rate of growth as we saw in the fourth quarter. Nevertheless, we anticipate that the remainder of 2024 will continue to see modest economic growth, and we are not anticipating a recession anytime soon. Next slide, please. This is largely being driven by fairly strong wage growth. Wages have been growing consistently and growing at a great rate greater than inflation. Next slide, please. This in turn has been driving a lot of strong consumption, both for businesses as well as for consumers. But there are still a number of red flags that we are keeping a close eye on. Next slide, please. First of all, while inflation has come down dramatically from near its peak in the summer of 2022, it is still at 3.4%, which is still frustratingly above the 2% target rate that the Federal Reserve would like to see inflation around. But that being said, wages are growing faster than inflation, but that gap is beginning to close. Next slide, please. Also of concern is the fact that due to inflation, due to increased higher costs, consumers have spent down their savings considerably. At its peak during the pandemic, consumers had nearly $3 trillion in excess savings, but coming out of the pandemic due to pent-up demand as well as inflation, consumers have really had to dig into their bank accounts to continue spending the money to buy the things they need. Next slide, please. In turn, as they burn down their savings, they've been adding more and more debt onto their credit card balances. Next slide, please. And then as far as small businesses go, small businesses continue to be very apprehensive about the economy. Our small business optimism index has continued to be at a 50-year or well below its 50-year average. And when we talk to our small business members, the three things that really bubble to the surface when we talk to them is that they continue to be very concerned about inflation. They're very frustrated with the lack of available qualified workers. And they're concerned about taxes going up. Next slide, please. all that being said, we continue to be a lot more optimistic about things than we were at this point last year. And that sentiment is shared by the majority of economists. This slide that I pulled from the Wall Street Journal indicates that in surveys of economists, most economists right now are not anticipating a recession in 2024, which is a sentiment shared by our economists as well. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, the economic optimism we have is not translating to our politics. Right now, Americans by a margin of 2-1 say the country is on the wrong track, and all of our federal elected officials' approval ratings are underwater. It's no surprise to any of you if you watch the news. President Biden's approval ratings have been underwater since about August of 2021. Former President Trump's approval ratings aren't much better. Next slide, please. And as unpopular as both our presidential candidates are, Congress's approval rating is even worse, hovering around 16%. Next slide, please. And who can blame Americans for feeling this way? This Congress is increasingly not known for legislating, but instead for its chaos and dysfunction. In 2023, Congress is only managed to pass 34 bills that made it to the president's desk for his signature. This puts the first session of the 118th Congress in the record books as the least productive first session of a Congress in modern history. And things have not really improved this year, and they are well on their way to being the least productive Congress 2 years, first and second session of any Congress in recent memory. Next slide, please. What more, despite Republicans having the majority in the House of Representatives and controlling the agenda, at least in the House of Representatives, Republican leadership has struggled to corral its own members, and they have frequently had to turn to Democrats to get enough votes to get the must-pass pieces of legislation across the finish line and to the president's desk. This includes things like the annual defense authorization bill, the various appropriations bills to fund the government, as well as last summer's bill, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which raised the debt ceiling and avoided a default on the nation's debt. Next slide, please. So what happened? We've seen this kind of partisanship before. We've had divided government where one party controls the Senate, one party controls the House, and another part, and the presidency is in a different party from one of the congressional chambers. So what has happened? We've been able to get things done in the past when we've had these levels of divided government, but now we're struggling to get anything done at all. A couple of things that we have observed. There are a variety of reasons to explain members of Congress behavior right now, but there are a couple of things we've observed that we think help explain what's going on. The first is that disruption has really become the norm. And what I mean by that is since the year 2000, there have been 12 election cycles. And in 10 of those election cycles, we have seen some change of control of government, meaning the House of Representatives flipped from Republican to Democrat, the Senate flipped, or the White House flipped, or all three flipped. Now contrast that with the period of 1960 to the year 2000. There were 20 election cycles. Only 7 of those election cycles resulted in any kind of change in control of government. And through most of that period of time, Democrats controlled the House of Representatives. So why this is significant? Well, between 1960 and the year 2000, if you were a member of Congress and you wanted to get anything done, you had to be willing to work with the other side of the aisle to get to build a coalition, to get the majorities you need to pass legislation. Since the year 2000, if you are particularly a member of the minority party, there's no incentive for you to work with the other side. Congress is changing control so frequently that you can sit back and wait until you're in the majority in order to get your priorities done. In other words, there aren't as many incentives right now for members to work across the aisle to get things done. Next slide, please. The other thing we're seeing is that there are fewer and fewer competitive congressional districts. During the 1970s, and by competitive congressional district, what I mean is voters in a district vote for a member of the House from one party, and they vote for a presidential candidate from the other party. So during the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, it was commonplace that you would have well over 100 congressional districts that were considered competitive. That has now fallen to just an average of 20 in the last 2 election cycles. This is largely due to gerrymandering, but this is significant because members of Congress now are no longer really concerned about their general election. What they're concerned about is being primaried. And when they're more concerned about being primaried, they tend to move to their political extreme. Members of Congress in blue districts move to their left. Members of Congress in red districts move to their right. And then when they win their primary, they don't really have a serious challenge in the general election, so they don't moderate at all. So what we're seeing right now is that the structural forces that encourage members of Congress to work across the aisle and encourage members of Congress to moderate their politics just aren't there anymore. We now have members of Congress who are less inclined to work with their people across the aisle and who are becoming more and more ideologically extreme. Next slide, please. So what has happened is Congress is doing less and less. Meanwhile, what we're seeing is presidents increasingly trying to push their priorities, their public policy priorities, through the regulatory rulemaking process. We have seen this across the past 4 administrations, both Republican and Democrat. But what has set the Biden administration apart is that they are trying to do far more than any of the previous administrations when it comes to regulating. In December, the Biden administration indicated that they had over 2,524 intended regulatory actions that they wanted to take this year alone. What's more concerning is not just the number of regulations they're trying to push out, it's how substantial these regulations are. And a regulation is considered economically significant when it has a projected economic impact of $200 million or more. And when you look at all of the regulatory actions that are currently under consideration by the Biden administration, the number that are considered economically significant, meaning they have a projected economic impact of $200 million or more, is 69% higher than the number that were considered economically significant at this point at the end of President Obama's first term. And we are seeing this across every single agency. I'm not going to try and run through a full list of what we're seeing, but just to give you a taste of what we're watching and what we are concerned about. We're seeing a lot of things come out of the Department of Labor, the National Labor Relations Board, OSHA, and the Federal Trade Commission that are concerning. For instance, the Department of Labor is trying to make it more difficult for an employer to classify workers as independent contractors. The Department of Labor is also they are in the process of raising the salary threshold under which employees must be paid overtime. The National Labor Relations Board recently attempted to redefine what it means to be a joint employer so that a business could be held liable for workers that they do not control. This is a direct attack on the franchise model of business. The OSHA recently issued their so-called walk-around rule. This would allow union representatives, activists, plaintiffs' attorneys to accompany OSHA inspectors when they're inspecting a work site. And the Federal Trade Commission recently issued a rule banning the use of non-competes agreements in all employment contracts across the nation. Next slide, please. So where does the U.S. Chamber come into play here? When it comes to legislating, we have a very active role in working with legislators to affect the direction of legislation. But when it comes to rulemaking, there's not much we can do. All we can really do is, like anyone else, file comments with the agency when they propose a rule. But once that rule is finalized, that's where we really step up our activity and try to impact the system. So one of the largest, or one of the most active parts of the U.S. Chamber right now is the U.S. Chamber Litigation Center. This is effectively our law firm. It is a 13-person litigation team made up of attorneys, most of whom have clerked for the U.S. Supreme Court or federal appeals courts. And what we do is when we see regulations that our members have concerns about or object to, we work either with our business members, our local and state chamber of commerce members, or we ourselves will file lawsuit as the lead plaintiff challenging those regulations. And right now we have over 15 active lawsuits against 12 federal agencies in 3 states challenging a number of these regulations. And so far we've been able to block the National Labor Relations Board's proposed joint employer rule. And we have filed lawsuit challenging the OSHA walkaround rule and the FTC non-compete rule that I already mentioned. This is what we are going to see largely for the remainder of the year. It's what we're likely going to see for some time to come. As long as Congress is having difficulty getting much done at all, presidents are going to be more and more active when it comes to trying to push their public policy agenda through regulations. And so the U.S. Chamber continues to ramp up its efforts here so that we can better challenge these rules when we see the government trying to micromanage how businesses operate. Next slide, please. Now, turning back to Congress, there is one thing I really want to make sure is on your radar, and it is the fact that the 2017 tax law is expiring. In 2017, as you all know, Congress enacted a sweeping series of individual tax rate cuts, as well as a number of new tax deductions that benefit the business community. Because of the way the bill was drafted in order to save money in the long run, the tax cuts, as well as many of these deductions, were not made permanent. A number of the deductions have already expired or are in the process of expiring, but the bulk of the bill will expire next year, and that includes all of the individual tax rates. So 3 of the tax deductions that have expired or are in the process of expiring now, the research and development deduction, the EBITDA interest deduction standard, and the 100% bonus depreciation deduction, are 3 deductions that we are trying to get extended this year. And we have actually had a little success here. Senator Wyden, as well as his counterpart in the House, Ways and Means Chairman Jason Smith, have negotiated a bill to extend these 3 tax deductions, as well as expand the child tax credit and the low income housing tax credit. This bill passed the House of Representatives. It had the full support of the entire Oregon congressional delegation. But our problem right now is that it is tied up in the Senate. So we are trying to get these 3 deductions through and extended beyond this year, but it's looking less and less likely that we will be able to get it done this year, and we're going to have to take this up when the entire bill expires next year. Next slide, please. In addition to those 3 deductions, the big deduction that impacts the business community that expires next year is the so-called 20% pass-through deduction. Now, what this is in 2017, when the tax bill passed, they dramatically lowered the corporate tax rate. Well, most businesses don't don't pay the corporate tax rate. They're small businesses, they pay their taxes differently. So in order to make sure that small businesses were not put at a tax disadvantage to large businesses, Congress created the 20% pass-through deduction. This tax deduction has a tremendous impact on the state of Oregon. Oregon is a small business state. 54% of all employment at private sector businesses in Oregon is at pass-through entities. And the collective tax benefit to businesses in the state of Oregon of the 20% pass-through deduction is $2.3 billion. Again, this deduction does not expire until next year, but right now our focus is on educating our members as well as senators and members of Congress about the need to extend not just this tax deduction, but the 3 tax deductions I already discussed. Because while we are much more optimistic about the economy right now, the economy cannot afford to take this kind of tax hit that we're going to see if the entire 2017 tax bill is allowed to expire next year. And again, it's not just the business deductions that are expiring, it's also all of the individual tax rate cuts that will be expiring next year. So our focus our legislative focus over the next 18 months is largely going to be on educating members of Congress on the need to extend the 2017 tax law and getting that tax law extended before the end of 2025. Next slide, please. The last thing I want to talk about is the upcoming November elections. And just to be completely honest, we have no idea what's going to happen. And frankly, no one really knows what's going to happen. At this point, everything is way too volatile. The polls are, in essence, suggesting that everything is tied. With respect to the presidential race, it is tied. And what we do know is that this is largely going to be carried out in 7 states. And mostly it's going to be taking place in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada. We may see some activity in North Carolina and Georgia, but largely it's going to be the 5 states, Nevada, Arizona, and the upper Midwest, where you're going to see most of the presidential action in 2024. Next slide, please. With respect to Congress, it too is also virtually tied. The generic ballot has Democrats right now, or the average of the generic congressional ballot has Democrats with just a 1 point advantage. So again, that is essentially tied. Next slide, please. In the U.S. Senate, right now, 1/3 of the U.S. Senate is in cycle. So 33 Senate seats are in cycle. Of those 33 seats, 20 of those seats are currently held by Democratic members of the Senate, 10 are held by Republicans, and 3 are held by independents who largely caucus with the Democrats. But of those 33 seats that are in cycle, only 7 are considered competitive, and all 7 of those are Democrats. Right now, there are really no Republican-held seats that are in danger of flipping from Republican to Democrat. And when you consider the fact that the Senate is currently split 51-49 in favor of the Democrats, all of the competitive seats that may flip are currently held by Democrats. Republicans would appear to have a slight advantage, at least on paper, of potentially retaking control of the Senate. Next slide, please. It's a little different story in the House of Representatives. As I said earlier, there's roughly only 22 seats that are considered competitive. Of those 22, 17 are currently held by Republicans in districts that voted for President Trump in 2020, whereas 5 of those are held by Democrats in seats that voted for, 17 are Republicans in seats that voted for President Biden in 2020. 5 are Democrats that are in districts that voted for President Trump in 2020. So again, at least on paper, here Democrats might have a slight advantage in their ability to retake control of the House of Representatives. One of those seats that is considered competitive is in Oregon. It is the Oregon 5th Congressional District, where Republican Representative Lori Chavez-DeRemer is in a district that voted for President Biden in 2020. Next slide, please. So again, we have no idea what's going to happen. Everything is way too, the majorities in the House and the Senate are so slim that it won't take much to see a change of control in either the House or Senate. And again, things at the presidential level are so volatile right now. that it's very difficult to predict. And we see 6 possible outcomes ranging from everything stays the same to everything completely changes to anything and everything in between. Our message to our members right now is that if we've learned anything over the past 10 years, it's that there are no guarantees based on who is in control of the White House, who is in control of Congress. That's not necessarily any advantage. We were able to get pretty significant wins when it came to taxes and regulations under President Trump, but we've also been able to get very significant wins when it came to infrastructure spending and the CHIPS Act under President Biden and the Democratic-controlled Congress. What's important is that businesses are at the table. Right now, we are seeing challenges to our system of free enterprise from both the progressive left as well as the populist right. So it's important that business has a voice at the table. And the best way to do that is doing what you're doing by supporting the work of the Dallas Chamber, the Oregon State Chamber, and our work back in DC. I can't emphasize it enough. When you all sign our coalition letters to Congress, when you weigh in with your members of Congress, it's tremendously helpful to us. We have no difficulties getting meetings with members of Congress to make our case, but the first question they're always going to ask is, what do the chambers back home have to say about this? So it's incredibly important to us that you are engaged when it comes to public policy, not just in Salem, but also with us back in DC. So I thank you for your support. I apologize again for all the technical difficulties, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I'll kick in with one question, if I may. Going back to an earlier slide talking about cost escalation, do you have any projections, especially related to construction materials, construction projects? I've seen some leveling off recently, but there's a lot of volatility out there as well. And this is having a tremendous impact on small communities where we're trying to take on airport, road construction projects, things of that nature. Cost escalation has just been dramatic over the past 3 years. Any projections?
Let me, our chief economist puts out an entire slide deck, and I feel like he does have something in there. Let me go back and check on that, and I'll follow up with Lisa.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Chris, I'll ask you this. I know that as a chamber, I am constantly looking at your letters, assessing it, running it by sometimes on my board. Sometimes we've already set a pre-existing, what can we comment and what can we support at the beginning of the year. And I signed on to several. Is there some other things that we can make a bigger message besides that with you signing on? Can they do individual letters and that? And who do we send those to if we want a little bit louder voice?
I think in addition to signing our letters as a chamber, yes, having members reach out individually to your member of Congress or the 2 senators, either via email or letter or phone calls, that is always helpful. And you're in Congressman Bentz's district, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think calling his office, calling his local offices, that always gets noticed when they start getting calls.
Okay.
But more generally, I think too, as we look forward to the next Congress and next year, like I said, the big focus is going to be on extending the 2017 tax law. So to the extent that you can start talking with the congressional delegation now about the importance of that, Senator Wyden is going to be irrespective of whether Republicans or Democrats control the Senate, Senator Wyden is still going to be the senior member on the finance committee, which is the tax writing committee. And so he needs to be hearing from businesses in Oregon about the need to extend the at least the portions of that bill that are beneficial to the business community.
Okay.
And I'm encouraging chambers that I meet with to consider putting in their legislative priorities for next year, because I know a lot of chambers start formulating those now. Extending the 2017 tax law, because this is going to be the major federal push for the business community going into 2025.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Chris,
Bill?
I have questions that I think suits well for Chamber of Commerce. So given lack of action at the federal level, do you see more action on various issues happening at the state and local level? And I'm thinking of things that could be some things like the climate agendas. I'm just can't think of the right word I want to say this, so I'm just going to throw out abortion legislation, rules like that. And even taxes, people's local entities shifting their taxes because they don't see action happening at the federal level. And follow up, if that's happening, does that create problems for businesses because there's different regulations across their regions?
Yeah, we do see, this is something we have seen across the past 8 years, where you saw during the Trump administration that more progressive states became far more active in doing things to counter what they disagreed with coming out of the Trump administration. And then you've seen a lot of this happening over the past 3.5 years during the Biden administration, where states like Texas has become much more activist in trying to push back on things that they disapprove with coming out of the Biden administration. You increasingly are seeing things where states are trying to enact policies and regulations and laws that are workarounds to things that the federal administration is doing that they disagree with. It just kind of, it's something we have seen over the past 8 years in particular.
So to play this a little bit more, I agree with what you're saying totally. It seems a lot of the local is what I'll call messaging on social culture war issues. Are there other things happening at local levels that are having an effect one way or another on businesses?
In the energy space, I think you are seeing attempts to, particularly in red states, where they're trying to find workarounds to some of the green energy things that the Biden administration is trying to do. I'm trying to think of some examples, but they're not coming in. They're not popping into my head right now. But
yeah, obviously the federal tax is not going to be affected by local legislation. So that's as you're saying, that's the big one that we were looking for next year.
And yeah, I think where you see this kind of most clearly is when it comes to litigation. You see a lot of, during the Trump administration, you saw a lot of state AGs in places like California, Washington, New York, Oregon, even bringing lawsuits to challenge regulatory actions of the Trump administration. And then particularly when it came to some of his immigration policies and then during the Biden administration, you've seen a number of red state AGs bringing lawsuits challenging environmental actions by the Biden administration. So I think that's where we're seeing it most significantly.
Thank you.
Chris, I know that, like, as you mentioned, one of the number one concerns of small business is finding enough employees. But it's my understanding that the unemployment rate is significantly low. First question, is that perception accurate? And then why is that, I guess?
Yes, it is. That is that is the biggest thing we constantly hear from members, is that they can't find workers. And this has been a problem that predates the pandemic. The pandemic just exacerbated it. People retired earlier than they planned to. A number of people just left the workforce for a variety of reasons. They realized that they were a 2-income family and they could get by on 1 income. And a lot of people just haven't returned because of things like they haven't been able to find affordable childcare. So you're correct. There aren't enough workers. And anyone who really wants a job can find a job now. It may not be the job they want, but they can find a job. The problem is we just don't have enough people in this country to fill all the job openings we have. Chambers of Commerce states they're doing as much as they can to train workers, but there just aren't enough workers to train. So what we have been focused on here is fixing our broken immigration system, allowing more people to come into the country legally. And this means reforming a lot of the employment-based visa programs that we have. The visa programs we have that allow businesses to bring workers in when they can't find enough qualified workers in the country, they don't let them bring enough workers in. And we see this across the entire spectrum of the economy, from the ag sector, the hospitality sector, construction, the high-tech sector. There aren't enough people to fill those jobs in this country. And when they go to try to fill those openings using legal means with the immigration system, the quotas on those visas fill up in a matter of days. It's incredibly bureaucratic, incredibly expensive. So we have really tried to get Congress to get serious about addressing immigration. It's just the political will isn't there. So we do what we can to get some things like cap relief when it comes to H-2B, H-2A, and J-1 visas. But we really need Congress to step up and fix this system to make it more responsive to the needs of employers.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Here in Wasco County, a good part of our economy revolves around agriculture, wheat, but especially cherries, apples, pears, and those are labor intensive, and our growers are working with the immigration policies and finding it very, very difficult. I'd like to ask, the other issue that we're working with that affects labor is childcare. Dan Spots has been working diligently to pull that together and improve our situation here. Has childcare been a Chamber of Commerce issue?
It is, and it's something that we are trying to figure out. Where is there a federal role to play here? As I said, the tax bill that Congress passed earlier this year to extend those 3 business tax deductions, it also included an increase in the child tax credit, which I understand is not directly tied to childcare, but it is a factor in getting additional funds into people's pockets to help them pay for childcare. But one of the problems we are encountering when it comes to childcare right now is that the 2 committees in Congress that would handle childcare The Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, and then the House Education and the Workforce Committee are chaired by two politically polar, couldn't be at more polar, at polar opposite ends of the spectrum than you could get. The Senate committee is chaired by Bernie Sanders, and the House committee is chaired by North Carolina Representative Virginia Foxx, who's extremely conservative. So you have two very, very different political agendas at work here, and getting them to come together on something when it comes to childcare is very difficult.
If I could chime in on that one, and it might be a perspective that would appeal to both of them, if anything were possible. The issue of employee recruitment and retention is closely tied to affordable childcare, as people need to work during the day and they cannot find reliable, consistent childcare. That affects the workforce and that affects companies. So there's an economic angle.
Oh yeah, and we 100% agree with you there.
Yeah. Good luck.
Any other questions?
Oh, good to see you back. Yeah, my
Yeah.
understanding from some articles is that the child credit, I got the name wrong there, is what's holding up the larger tax package. It
is. There's bipartisan support for the 3 business tax deductions, but a number of Senate conservatives, led by Idaho Senator Mike Crapo, object to the expansion of the child tax credit, and that's what's holding it up right now. So if any of you have operations in Idaho, I would encourage you to weigh in with Senator Crapo's office.
Well, out of respect for time, first off, Chris, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking time and being with us today, and all the information that you shared. You and I will be in touch as always, on a weekly basis, if not sometimes more. So if we don't have any further questions, I would say that we go ahead and take off, and we all go to our other craziness. If there's any follow-up questions that you think of, please reach out. I have Chris's contact information, and I will just send that to you, and you can reach out to him directly, or you can pass it through and I'll just send it on to him for you.
Lisa?
Yes.
You offer and are able to share the slides. Could we have access to these slides, Chris? Would that be available?
Yeah.
I have them now because he had to send them to me. So I have them. So I will send those to you. If you want those, just let me know. I think I have all of your emails who are on here. So if you do want them, I will get them to you guys. Yeah, not a problem.
Me too on that one, Lisa. Thank you.
So with that, thank you again, Chris, and everyone. Have a great day. And I will keep you up to date with what they're doing, and to give you those updates also as what's happening in DC, and then also what's happening with OSCC in Oregon. With that, everyone, have a good one. Thank you.